Doom: The Dark Ages is one of the most unexpected surprises to come out of 2025. I was already really ecstatic for its release, and I already had a lot of confidence in ID Software pulling it off, even considering the fact that ID Software is my favorite game company to date, as I love pretty much the majority of all the games that I played from them. It's been a long time coming, and I can't believe that Doom Eternal is already 5 years old by now, but with The Dark Ages releasing as a prequel, from what I've seen so far, for some reason I just couldn't get really into it. I mean, sure, it looked badass as hell, and I was still certainly excited for it, but for some reason it wasn't the same feeling as Eternal's hype. Maybe it was the marketing differences, the vibe of everything, maybe since it wasn't a direct continuation of the last game, whatnot, I'm not exactly sure. But either way, regardless, I was still up in the air for something like this, as Doom is one of, if not, my favorite video game franchise to date, so I was already ready to rip and tear until it was done. Anyway, without going on about how I felt beforehand with this game, let's get into the roots of this. The overall design and texture of this game is absolutely phenomenal. It has just as much environmental storytelling as all of the prior games, with areas like Argent-D'Nur and Hell being the most present. The feeling of the Dark Ages is, well, just as much as you'd want it to be, although if you were looking for something really fucked up or really dark, it doesn't necessarily go into the hardest boundaries of something like, I don't know, Silent Hill. It still hits hard with everything though, and the game itself is very consistent with itself in terms of its atmosphere. It's just as bloody as all of the other Doom titles, albeit obviously less on the red hellish vibe of the other games outside of some areas you see while going through hell. And even though the game is pretty consistent in its design, there's actually a pretty good variety of maps that still differentiate from each other, while the demons maintain the same level of quality on each as you fight through them all. Some maps are a bit darker than others, while some are a bit brighter, and remind me a lot of Doom Eternal's feel in some instances, as that game always stood out to me to be a lot lighter in terms of its color grading compared to the prior Doom games. That being said though, this game is way less sharper than any of the Doom games. Right off the bat, aside from the cutscenes at least, this game looks very smooth looking. Doom 2016 and Eternal were highly more detailed in contrast in terms of the levels of textures you can see in sharpness. I couldn't tell if it was a console problem though, perhaps a TV difficulty, or the game just ran like this in general, since I was playing on a PS5 on a pretty good TV. But when I looked into it a bit, it seemed like it was just the game that runs like that. I mean, the game is pretty long overall and offers a lot of stuff. Oh yeah, did I mention how long this game is? When you play it fully, not every level has the longest runtime, sure, but this game has 22 missions. 22 missions. I was very surprised to see this, and when finishing the game, it definitely did feel that long, as the majority of the missions didn't really have anything going against them. The pacing also was never so bad, although there's some areas in which I will talk about very soon that were a little distracting during gameplay. Otherwise, it felt naturally quite well. I also never had any issues performance-wise on console, as it ran very well and only held back with a few minor bugs and glitches, though those were mainly seen on replaythroughs of the levels. Overall, the vibe and atmosphere in this game is just fantastic. It still felt very metal alongside all of this, which is obviously the best fitting with Doom. The only thing that was distracting from the rest of the game was the parry attacks during gameplay, in which, if you've seen, is green. It's not a bad thing overall though, as it plays a completely new gameplay perspective and role. You see, during gameplay, it is supposed to stand out, since they likely chose bright green to appear easier to see, just as much as I believe Eternal's design was likely to be more colorful and bright to see and better to catch on to more important game design. Since in comparison to Doom 2016 didn't rely on the same game designs during combat, since that game in particular was more of a shoot and glory kill fun sort of game, with its great nicks of course. It's still a well-versed game and has great combat, but Eternal and the Dark Ages go much harder and much more strategic, which is obviously a plus. Let's focus more on that though, the combat. This game is very much leaning more towards Eternal than the other games. Sure, this game is taking place almost right after Doom 64 The Lost Levels, plus Doom Eternal's flashbacks and lore scrolls, but Eternal was a huge game changer. It felt like a jet, just like Hugo Martin had stated previously, but this time, you're a tank. But that doesn't take away from the amazing new mechanics that come with the Dark Ages. Sure, The game is once again much different from its predecessors, as it's not only a whole different tone that comes with it still has its funny moments, but it also is still very directly linked to Eternal combat-wise. Or, at the very least, it is reminiscent in the sense that they are both mainly combat gameplay focused, being extremely efficient and unique to the FPS genre in general. You know, whenever people talk about games that are game-changing, or games that are so unique that they stand out to the test of time, it's usually games mentioned like Halo, BioShock, Quake, Wolfenstein 3D, Resident Evil 4, Silent Hill 2, or even the original Doom games. And while, sure, those games might definitely leave a bigger impact on them as more and more games from the past, present, and future take notice from, but I can't help but feel that games like Doom 2016, Eternal, and the Dark Ages just don't get enough recognition or appreciation. I mean, seriously, have you played any games in the past that have felt like these? It always feels like the typical formula that goes around for FPS games that are more akin to COD, if anything. But these games are genuinely so well done, and considering these games are completely AAA, in my opinion, these games should definitely be talked about more. If anything makes me happier, the indie scene lately for FPS games have definitely taken notice of this and focus much more on Doom Eternal's level of intelligence, which makes me happier than ever. Anyhow, I don't need to ramble on about that as much today, as there are more important things to focus on in this video, but I needed to bring it up because these gameplay mechanics are just so smart, and yes, absolutely, in my opinion, are game-breaking. In the good way, of course. Let's get back to the combat for a bit. No, seriously, this game really does make you feel like a tank. Quite literally. You can jump onto the ground full of an enormous amount of enemies and your whole body will demolish them all onto the ground just through impact. Unlike the past two Doom games of this modern era, this game is actually the fastest. There's a sprint mechanic in this game that moves you swiftly to the targets if chosen to. It isn't anything like Call of Duty or modern Halo though, since it doesn't force you to hold your gun up, and once you're done, it takes a couple of seconds to move back into action. No, this game is still very much Doom. It doesn't shy away from moving forward and instead backing up behind walls to heal. Your new shield is your wall. It's actually perfect. The new shield that you pick up straight from the beginning of this game is an absolute banger. You'll eventually add a saw mechanic to it which will hold onto and damage enemies as you throw it onto them. This game in particular is very time oriented though. The timing of things actually matters a whole lot. You see, if you shoot at a demon from afar, obviously like any other game, it might not cause so much damage against it, but if you shoot at it enough, it staggers the demon, but not in the same way as the past two games do it. In Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, once you tank enough damage from a demon before its full health is gone, you have the ability to finish it off with a glory kill, which is still the most satisfying kill ever added to a video game in my opinion. This time, that's gone. When you stagger an enemy in this game, it still allows you to kill them off, sure, but now the added boss fights that are frequent throughout the game and become natural enemies to fight, they have staggers that will allow you to do it 2 or 3 times during a fight. Sometimes, if you keep shooting at it, it will remove this stagger and move past it rather than focus on it completely up until their next eventual stagger that shows up. This completely diminishes the final glory kill that can happen with its cool as hell animation that comes with it, which is the unfortunate loss in this situation. That being said, there are certain times where, depending on where you choose to commit your final blow to an enemy, perhaps even depending on which enemy you're fighting, there will be a very swift, fast glory kill that you can still do on your hands. Although it'll probably be pretty rare if you're not thinking about it. There's different ways of finishing off enemies from a stagger though. In Doom 2016, you have the ability to punch enemies and cause just a tad bit of damage off of them, usually only really affecting the fodder demons. In Eternal, there's a focus of the blood punches that can be built up to finally blow off a bunch of demons off your back, if not meet other gameplay mechanics built on other demons. But in the Dark Ages, you have different melee sources that go from the power gauntlet to the flail, which is my personal favorite, to the dread mace. Each of them can be used, or at the very least randomly chosen, sometimes or depending on the specific demon stagger. So it really doesn't matter which one is equipped when doing a finishing stagger. Each of these have different mechanics though, ranging from the power gauntlet being important for causing more damage, to the flail dealing with armor, all the way to the dread mace, which makes you even feel more like a tank as it's causing significant amounts of damage to other demons. However, it only has a single charge and and a very long recharge time, so you need to use it very wisely. And even though there's usually ammo scattered around everywhere when looking around during combat, it's very important to use melee to gather some of it back, since this time there is no chainsaw. There's also several interesting and unique upgrades that can be added to these melee weapons, but the majority of them, it is really just additions to what's already on them. Speaking of weapons, this game offers a large amount of weapons. Again, there's no inclusion to the chainsaw, unfortunately. With that, there also comes no grenades or flame belch either. Since this game heavily relies on the shield, it's the next best thing that comes with it. And plus, it's already got a saw on it, so that's close enough, right? There's a great amount of guns on the weapon wheel this time though. More specifically, there is about 11 of them, each of which will carry the same amount of ammo between the two on each that you can switch with. Which I'm really happy they changed about it, since in Eternal in 2016, there were multiple weapons with the same ammo type on different sides still, although I still think that those work the way they did separately anyway, because the combat was never really surrounded around the fact that there were multiple to use. In Eternal, the mods were a very important part of it, acting sometimes as a somewhat secondary weapon if you will. Oh yeah, did I mention the mods? No longer are there any mods in this game for any of the weapons. It would be difficult to do since the weapon variety also has a set of their own different skills to be used, as well as the shield being present and immovable. The shield also already acts as the second pushdown trigger, so it wouldn't even work. Also, this game doesn't have the same focus as Eternal. Eternal prioritizes its guns a lot, with the game mainly focusing on the different vulnerable spots that can affect the demons till its death. This time around, we don't focus on it as much. There's still instances of getting things out of the way, but the main point of focus for this game is actually the armor. The armor serves as the newest weak point system in a way, but obviously since it is over demons, it is completely necessary to get rid of before killing it off completely. No matter what, you can eliminate them without needing to strategize further with it, but there are definitely better ways of getting rid of them faster. For example, the flail, as I mentioned earlier, is a great way of destroying armor when given the chance to. That being said, the armor itself needs to be burnt to the point of it becoming fully visible and orange. Using your weapons is absolutely needed to cover it to that burning point, and the best solution would either be the flail, or much more usefully in my opinion, throwing the shield, completely annihilating it off for the next big fight. There's also shield enemies that go in packs, sometimes resorting to the Armor S shield or a blue-like energy one. The armor shield works in the same way as any other armor in the game would, as you need to shoot at it to become orange, but you have no reason as to do it with the other ones if they're surrounding them. You only need to do one, and once you hit it with your shield, it's already a straightforward win. As for the energy shield enemies, you can also just throw the shield at them to kill them off easily, or you can use either the accelerator or the cycler, both of which that use the same energy ammo type. It shows that some weapons can be important to the game overall, but it's not as needed or as necessary as Eternal's mechanics are played out. It probably explains why it feels like there's a delay between moving weapons through the weapon wheel. I personally use the Super Shotgun and the Ravager the most during gameplay, because my god is the Ravager such a beast when fully upgraded all the way. Leaders are a brand new addition to this game and play the role of being, well, a leader of some sort. They don't give commands or anything to the demons, but you have to kill off a certain amount of demons in order to finally damage the leader. And when you can, they have more health than the average demon than what you usually fight from them. Once you defeat them and then get a stagger open, you can finally do a little glory kill in grabbing what seems to look like their heart, bust it gone, and gain either extra health, armor, or ammo from them, adding to your Slayer, much similar to how Argent energy cells were utilized in Doom 2016, or how Sentinel crystals were in Eternal. It's just that in this game, they are gained from killing off the leaders. And if I'm going to be quite frank, I do really like the idea that you have a fighting chance to win it over rather than just finding it through exploration, which works either way, but I do really like the change. Besides the normal combat in this game, there's also sections in particular that are centered on their own versions of their gameplay, being the Atlan and Dragon gameplay segments. Now, I don't necessarily dislike them, and I actually don't think that they ruin the pacing as much as I've heard other people online talk about them, but I do think that since it wasn't necessarily the main priority when making this game, that ID Software probably didn't focus on it too much. It obviously had a lot of effort put into it, and I seriously hope that it comes back in future DLC stories, because they're only in like 3 or 4 missions in total, and I think they can expand on it a bit. The Atlan fights are pretty damn cool, since you get to take on titans that you've seen back to back from both games hovering over you, and now you get to beat the shit out of them, and overall it's just so satisfying doing so. The combat is alright, but it isn't too special. All you really do is throw punches with your fist, and then you dodge their punches, having the ability to do a final blow which impacts others, which is satisfying and all, but it's nothing groundbreaking. It isn't only fists though. You then get to pick up guns and shoot them as well, which takes them out pretty quickly. There's also moments before the near end of the game where you can build your meter up and use the cannons connected to it, which is pretty cool and very powerful. If you didn't know this already, but Hugo Martin previously before the Doom games worked on Pacific Rim, which as you know has giant robots, also known as Jaegers, that are obviously like basically the main point of the movie. So he's a huge fan of controlling giant robots and fighting kaiju, which is basically what this was. So I hope this was a dream come true just to make this happen in general. As for the dragon fight, Surratt, who is your main dragon within the game, also who I like to call Richard, is some of my favorite sections. You're huge, maybe not as huge as Atlan, but you feel pretty much the same as a kaiju yourself. You can fly freely around the map, uncovering secret areas at times to land and go look through. Sometimes you'll stumble into new zones by accident or follow other ships to complete one of the game's challenges. You can also hover over the small little demons you fight throughout the game, and it's just so fun killing them all so easily considering they were much bigger in person. That all being said though, Surratt's combat is very generic. At first I really hated it, but over time I got used to it, but regardless I just never found it fun or never really stood out to me. All you really do is stand in one place and aim at a specific bubble, only to just wait for the next green dodge parry mechanic, and then it will take it out eventually. Do it over and over and over again, rinse and repeat. I've tried this on harder, faster difficulties, but no matter what, it doesn't really make much of a difference. It never finds a way to get me intrigued or do better with it, which is unfortunate because considering how fun it is to actually fly the dragon, the combat just isn't it. Now, let's get into the exploration of this game. Overall, it's pretty good. I don't really know how to compare it to 2016 and Eternal though, since they are all very similar, but I do find the other two to be much more enjoyable when looking around for some reason. The Dark Ages already has an epic design outlook on its environments, but it does seem a bit difficult finding things sometimes. Usually when you do, it isn't too bad since that's the point of looking around for things, but either way, I'm just not the biggest fan of the majority of it. Sometimes there is walls that you can break through the shield to find a hidden area, but it's a bit hard to see if you don't have your shield aimed at it already. But I do get that that is just a part of exploration in general, and it does remind me a little bit of the older games, since those types of secrets were never out in the open. There's gold that is found throughout each of the missions that I don't really like much. It gives me more of an initiative to find and grab every single one of them, and I just personally just found it to be really annoying grabbing each and every one of them. I know they aren't necessarily required, so I can see some people finding this to be a really stupid gripe of mine, but I'm sorry, I just do. The gold itself is required to upgrade some of your weapons though, including the runes as well. There's also rubies and wraith stones that ultimately serve as other ways of upgrading your things further down the line. The map itself is very similar to the other game's designs, except this time everything is already shown to you as you move throughout it. In 2016 and Eternal, it was an upgrade system using Praetor tokens to allow you to better see more secrets, but this time it's completely free, aside from some secret areas that it won't tell you, such as the dragon segments. The collectible toys return once again, and it's pretty neat seeing some new additions of enemies getting their own figure. Also, I'm so glad that they included this again because I just love it. You can also find weapon skins throughout exploration as well. The weapons themselves, I'll admit, aren't great to use to the same extent as something like Eternal. As I mentioned before, this game has different priorities. What makes it unique this time around is that I don't really think that you need to use specific weapons for specific uses. Like, none of them are throwaway weapons. In 2016, the pistol becomes easily disposable after a while, and I'd argue even the combat shotgun at some point in both 2016 and Eternal, although it still has its uses. Don't worry, I know. But in this game, something like even the combat shotgun, which is the first weapon you have access to, still does great amounts of damage even later on into the game. I mean, sure, it isn't no super shotgun, but it's still very good all things considered. Depending on the upgrade you use, it still can come in handy, and I still love flaming demons up with it. That being said, the super shotgun is probably still, as always, in my opinion, the best weapon in the game, outside of the Ravager. What all is there in general, though? Well, I've already mentioned the combat shotgun, but what about the rail spike shredder? Is it any good? And I would say yes, it is pretty good. It's very easy and fun to control, and it never loses any balance, as if you'd really expect that from a Doom game anyway, especially when you're the weapon of gods and kings. The plasma accelerator is a much different option though. This weapon is very useful against energy shield enemies, but other than that, I never really found it to be much great to use, even if its upgrade skills are added. It isn't a straightforward gun either, since it goes all over the place, so it definitely isn't a good long-range weapon. But damage-wise, it is still pretty good. I just could never really find a reason to pull it out, honestly. The pulverizer is a whole different rank, though. The moment I got my hands onto this gun, it was a blast, and I loved it right off the bat. This thing obliterates all and everything your side, pretty much all in front of you in an instant. The ammo goes down pretty quickly, but it quickly became my favorite gun to use in the game. Or at least at first. Also, the skull crunching is so damn cool and satisfying to watch. Such a unique addition to the Doom franchise. The next is a rail spike impaler, and at first, I didn't really care about this thing. It does a good amount of damage, but it wasn't doing it for me. It was really nice shooting imps into walls and all, but it took a while to get really used to it. And then after a while, after impaling heads and forcing myself to complete the mastery challenges, my god did I fall in love. Now, it isn't a gun I'd recommend to use all the time, of course, and obviously you should still be using different guns depending on the circumstance, despite how little you might need to change weapons from time to time. I think I just said chime. But it's just so fun to use. Once you're able to slow down time and decapitate heads of larger foes, it becomes addicting to watch over and over again. Coming back to plasma weapons though, the plasma cycler is, well, it's a lot like the plasma rifle from Eternal and the original games. I kind of like seeing it that way, since the comparison is with that, as the plasma accelerator in this game reminds me a whole lot of Doom 3's plasma rifle, as well as 2016's design too, which I'm not entirely sure if that were intentional, but I love the similarities either way. But going back to the cycler, this thing is much better than the accelerator in my opinion. It does a lot more damage compared to the accelerator, and it isn't going in different directions constantly. And if you upgrade the weapon, it gets even better, allowing you to drag energy onto other enemies as well as boosting up the energy on the gun even higher, causing a massive amount of conflicting damage, which is awesome. Since I already talked about the super shotgun, I might as well just compare it to the other games. This shotgun is just as much of a beast as the original 90s games. It's so incredibly powerful, and it runs like shooting tank shells. That being said, it doesn't really add too much, even in its upgrades. It holds a fantastic design overall, but nothing compares to Eternal's amazing meat hook grapple. That was just too good to compete with. Otherwise, still the best weapon in the game outside of the Ravager, which is amazing. I keep bringing it up in the same sentence as the super shotgun, but the whole reason behind that is that those are the two main weapons that I use the majority of the time in this game. In contrast to the pulverizer, which looks just like the Ravager as well as using the same ammo type, being skulls, this time the shooting range is much linear in between rather than shooting all at once. It also covers more ammo when shooting, decreasing maybe a little damage maybe, but it's really hard to tell because it genuinely is such a help causing so much damage, and I love it. It goes deeper in the fact that the more you shoot, the faster the fire rate and the damage becomes. It's so good, especially on bigger demons. The Reaver chain shot now, that's a different being alone. It's a pretty good weapon that causes a powerful amount of damage the longer you charge it up, but it was another one of those weapons where I just couldn't get into it that much. I feel like it's best used when fighting boss battles or larger enemies you run across, but either way, it's still a pretty good gun to have just in case, but it ain't no rocket. Speaking of rockets, this game supplies you with both a grenade launcher and a rocket launcher, both of which are pretty good overall. I like the inclusion of the grenade launcher a lot because it reminded me a lot of Quake, since if I remember correctly, I don't recall any other Doom game having one, so it was nice to see something new like this appear. The rocket launcher is back, and I don't really have much to say honestly, since I've never really cared for big guns in general. but it is useful in times when needed for sure. Obviously the better pick over a super shotgun, especially if you want to shoot an cacodemon from afar. It isn't too far of a reach though, as the BFG in this game isn't a big gun this time around, but rather is called the BFC, also known as the Ballistic Force Crossbow. I am not joking when I say that I actually don't really know the purpose of having this weapon in this game. Perhaps it's very rare, but the only time I ever found ammo for this gun was when you first get access to it, and I never really found a reason to use it since. It does just as much, if not even bigger damage as prior BFGs have though, which is cool and all, but again, it really doesn't help much at all after this mission, unless you wanted to use it on a big boss fight. In the original Doom games, you can find ammo for the BFG easily, since it shared the same ammo type as the plasma rifle. In 2016, you'd either find it throughout the maps, or gain it back in a rare chance with the chainsaw. In Eternal, it was only found in very specific areas, and made sense for the game's game design, as frustrating as it was for not having much for it. Same with the Unmaker. I just never found any use for the BFC in this game, other than maybe using it on single boss fights I didn't want to deal with. Otherwise, it just felt like it all went to waste. If you guys know other ways in which it might seem useful, or I'm missing something in terms of where the hell the ammo is, please comment it down below since I haven't seen anything about it. Challenges are also back in each of the separate missions and reward you with gold for finishing them. There's also mastery challenges after completely fully upgrading your weapons as well, which is also a returning feature from 2016 and Eternal, although this time they do not add anything to the weapons themselves, but rather give you a skin in return. Gore Nests make a return, though their design has been reworked this time around. Instead of being activated with a punch like before, they now awaken when using your shield. Otherwise, I don't really think that there's much change to it aside from that, but I'm glad they appeared more often compared to Eternal, since they were only really featured in the Ancient Gods, unless you count the Super Gore Nests or the Slayer Keys. Unfortunately, Slayer Keys don't make an appearance this time around, since they were something I genuinely really liked, and I thought added a little more to the fun. Even though it'd be difficult thinking about what it would be useful for this time, not only since that there's no more Fortress of Doom, but the same for the Unmaker. I thought they'd do something similar with it, considering it's right after Doom 64, but I suppose it wasn't really necessary anyway, so I'm not too disappointed by them not including it. Going back to the keys though, the typical ones like the normal keys and the skulls reappear within the missions, but secret purple keys are present, they just aren't Slayer keys, and really only do simple openings for more exploration usually, sometimes gaining something from it at times, but they're really nothing too special. I didn't want to mention this at first because of how controversial within the community it has been getting, but I wanted to speak out on my opinion anyway, considering it is a part of the game after all and is genuinely a major part of it, and that is difficulty modifiers. The difficulty settings within the game is offered to you right off the bat, with the option to change it during the game as well, aside from the obvious important stuff you shouldn't be allowed to go back to, such as Ultra Nightmare and the Extra Life mode. Also, I'm Too Young to Die got replaced with Aspiring Slayer as a new title. Automatic 1 out of 10 for me now. Horrible game. Review's over. I'm just kidding. I seriously don't care. I do kind of miss it though. But going back to the difficulty modifiers, these were added into the game and can be set to literally anything you want. So if you'd like to experience the game in an extremely hard way, you can switch everything up into that way. But if you want to feel invincible, you can also play it that way. Obviously, Doom is a franchise where you want to feel like a god regardless, and playing on easy mode is completely fine. I'm very glad that it isn't some sort of Dark Souls type game where everything needs to play on some sort of ultra violence and that's it. That certainly wouldn't help at all, and there's nothing against Dark Souls or anything, but I don't want Doom to end up anything like that, since it's never been that way. And to be fair, I don't think I've heard anyone say it anyway. Okay, let's move on. That being said, if I'm being completely honest here, I am not a fan of difficulty modifiers. Of course, players should have the options to play as they please in terms of game difficulty, but I would say that a lot of people have given the chance to play a horror game and then get to be invincible right away. That would completely eliminate their experience, but that's how they're thinking. If players are forced to understand the mechanics better and learn the game from experience, maybe adding an extra layer, potentially a very easy mode if they wanted to, would lend more appreciation to the game as well as want to get even better, extending this to try out for even harder difficulties. Giving the player the ability to be invincible right off the bat is boring, and I would 100% rather have it be a reward to the player after completing the main campaign already. Now I know that there's multiple arguments against this, and I'm not going for the Doom is woke because of this thing, because not only do I not know what that even really means, but I have nothing to do with that. That being said though, if you're watching this, I do want you or other people, if possible from seeing this video, to comment your feelings on this, as I'd love to hear more open opinions on it, because while I'm obviously against these reasons, I've seen several people fighting at it for pretty decent points revolving around the player control and the playstyle that they should be allowed to have. But I'm just personally not a fan of giving this much power off the bat, because the Doom games were completely fine without it, and I just hate it that you can just run through it all and get every single achievement so swiftly without learning literally anything, as I sincerely mean it when I say that it's literally invincible feeling. It should be something the player should earn at the end, whether they play it on Aspiring Slayer, Hurt Me Plenty, or whatever. I do completely understand where some other people are going though. And I will say that difficulty modifiers in general, outside of being available at the start of the game regardless of beating the game or not, that they are really fun to play around with, and I'm actually really happy that it is an option, even though I still rather wish it was a reward. I mean, you literally get to change the damage against the player, the damage the player does against the demons, how fast everything is going, whatnot, and seeing all of that, like literally controlling how either of them or all of them could control, is literally the coolest thing ever to put into a Doom game. And the freedom should be a reward, and just a great feeling overall of having this after beating such a great game. The locations in this game are fantastic, not only to just look at, but they're very well done. I've already mentioned the tone and the atmosphere, as well as the environmental storytelling, but I had to go back to this. It really shows off the worlds well, and going off of Earth and Eternal, Mars in 2016, and coming back to different yet similar locations in Hell, it just comes back into appreciation. Once again, since the graphics are very tied together, everything looks very samey, if that makes sense, in the sense that the vibe is never really lost. It's very consistent in terms of that feeling. I absolutely love looking into the sky to see everything moving and imagining what it would be like to be over there, just giving that nostalgic feeling that I love feeling in older video games. It might be a bit odd going on with this, but I don't know. I have those feelings with it and I like it a lot, so I'm gonna take it. I will say though that compared to the past locations in the last couple of games, the missions in this game just aren't as memorable. The reason might just be that the game just came out, but for some reason they just don't stand out as much as the other game's locations do for some reason. There's one area that absolutely does though. The place I am referring to has multiple levels to it, and from afar it doesn't look like much, but oh no, it has a lot to offer. It's called the Cosmic Realm, and while the color grading might be annoying or boring looking at times, especially when mixed with the toned down sharpening feel of this game, the areas are actually really cool. It's actually straight up a mind-bending illusion, and I think Chapter 16's Carthol Marshes is a perfect example of that. It's quite literally something you would expect from one of 90s Doom's secret levels, just straight up being a place full of strange feelings all around and being confused. While the entire map isn't exactly made up of secret areas and mind-boggling motions, it still encapsulates that same feeling of an older Doom title, which I love. But not only that, but the other missions within the Cosmic Realm also have many unique and interesting mind-bending puzzles, which are all just as great, but I'll spare you from knowing because I don't want to ruin what is best seen within the game. I will say though, it would definitely be nicer to see a lot more in the missions though, as I felt like the inclusion of more could stand out, especially if having the addition of hiding even deeper secret areas for the player to find on replaythroughs of the game, because the game design and world lifting vibe is perfect. Anyhow, speaking of the tone and the vibe of the game, the music is very well done. I wasn't sure how to feel about it since Finishing Move was doing it, but I'm really glad they did a good job, because quite honestly, moving from Mick Gordon to this, it was probably a really hard and difficult decision to make. But either way, I think they were definitely worth it. Their work on the Halo franchise after Marty was in my opinion very well done. Mick Gordon will always stand out for his work on Doom though. I mean seriously, BFG Division and The Only One They Fear Is You are only a couple of my favorite songs ever, and the rest is just as gold. The demons in this game are actually awesome. Not only in their designs, but the combat between them and yourself is great. Imps make a return as they do every game, but this time there's several different versions of them. In fact, there's about 4 types in this game, which is absolutely insane. Most iconic of the bunch is the Imp Stalker, which is a great callback to the original 90s Imps design, though it's not one-to-one. There's also the standard Imp, which is covered in old fur, behaving much like the ones from Doom 2016 and Eternal. Visually and functionally similar, probably by design, though it's very likely that they are related in some way. Stone Imps return from the ancient gods, but now they can be killed via parry attacks. They also don't look as cute, which is sad. My personal favorite, the Nightmare Imps from Doom 64, make a return, and they are invisible until they either show themselves or you attack, and I love it. Their design itself is certainly one of the best so far. Zombies are back and resemble Doom Eternal's unwilling design. They're just as easy to kill as the past 2 games. Soldiers are back, and are actually much more fragile than any other soldier from the past Doom games it seems, as they die extremely quickly by almost anything. Pinky Riders are a brand new set of enemies with a brand new design for the Pinky, as well as an archer that rides it. It reminds me a lot of the spider jockeys out of Minecraft. Hell cultists don't really do anything in this game, so just murder them. Mancubists are back, and oh my god, they look even uglier in this one. It's so entertaining shooting their limbs off though. The Hell Knights are also back and look much like the other designs again, and I actually think I prefer this one over the last 2 for some reason. He just looks so freaky. The Battle Knights design is also a standout. I really dig the armor. Nothing will ever beat Doom 3's Hell Knights design though. I'm sorry, that one will always stand out to me. Lost Souls are back and their design is just as good. I don't know why, but them not being too bright fits the mood of the game better to me. Gameplay wise though, I'd actually argue that these are the most annoying ones so far, but they're never constantly used or anything. They're just not parryable, but if you're using one of the Skull Crusher weapons, it'll take them out like a breeze. I also don't recall seeing them move around much. It always felt like they would just spawn in front of you most of the time. The game brings a new Cyber Demon to the forefront, but man, I hate it. I'm sorry, I don't like the design at all. Outside of the designs though, the combat against this thing is pretty fun, though very timely and intense. The Vagary is a brand new— Wait, what? Doom 3 reference? Vagary is back! But very different from the original Doom 3's design. I'm actually really shocked that nobody's talking about this. Doom 3 canon confirmed? I'm kidding. Although it is canon in another timeline. I just want them to connect to the newer games a bit. Maybe bring the Maledict in again sometime? That'd be sick. Anyway, the Vagary is a great new reoccurring boss fight with cybernetic enhancements, and it's just like the Cyber Demon in the sense that it takes a lot to kill it fully. But I love its design and its combat. Arachnotrons are also back, but oh my god, I love their designs so much. They're probably the most annoying to parry from though, since they constantly shoot at you and taking damage sucks. Who would have known? They look the coolest out of any of the games though. Definitely not Doom 2's design, Jesus Christ. Hell Tanks are a new machine that shoots at you. All you really need to do is parry it and they're gone. Tentacles are back and just as annoying as ever, even adding on with their giant counterpart. Oh my god. Revenants return with a Bloodborne-esque design and they look so freaking good. And compared to Eternal in 2016, they definitely made the best out of this one because they're so much harder to kill this time around and actually made it a good fight with them, other than just taking them out right away. Whiplashes are back and annoying as ever, but since you have your shield, they're much easier to get rid of this time around. The Agadon Hunter. I was so glad that they brought a pre-cybernetic version of the Doom Hunter in this game, and they look great. They did a great job with this combat as well. Cacodemons are back, but they're now called Cacodemon Hybrids. I was actually praying for these things to be Octobrains out of Duke Nukem, but I don't know how that crossover would work anyway. But these things are much more difficult this time around. They tank damage and they are so annoying to fight. You can't get close to them or it's instant damage. Their design is so good though. The Komodo is another new large enemy, very quick and nasty. Love them as well. The Cosmic Baron is something I wouldn't expect out of here because I didn't think that these things are actually Barons of Hell. I mean, yeah, sure, they're quote-unquote Cosmic Barons, but since there isn't an actual Baron in this game, these are the replacements in a way. And they are pretty fun to fight still. One demon that isn't fun to fight though is the Acolyte though. They're witches that play with you and move around so quickly I can't even land a blow on the first approach. They are really annoying, but once they're out of the way, it isn't so bad anymore. Maker Drones are back, but they're really only at the last couple of levels, so they don't really have much of a part to play other than showing up for the story. There's several champions of the bigger enemies that I've already mentioned, but they're not really too important other than being a much stronger version of those enemies, as well well as just being a consistent enemy type to fight. Overall, this game does a great job in terms of its gameplay and environmental design, the music, the graphics, the shift from Doom Eternal's combat, as well as just being a prequel. But what about the story though? Is that any good? Well, unfortunately, due to limitations I have on my end of things, I'm going to have to continue talking about its story another day, in the story overview of the game. That being said though, to cut short, yes, I think the story is alright. Do I think it's better than the other game's stories though? Well, I guess you'll have to hear that from me next time. Otherwise, I love this game. I don't know where they're going from here though. If they'll pull an Ancient Gods and keep all the guns, maybe they'll end up having new additions, I really don't know. But we know for sure that DLC is coming, so be on the lookout for that. That being said, this has been a great time working on this. I've never put so much time and effort into something this long of a video, and I really appreciate it to anyone who is actually watching this till its end. Hopefully that's my friends. That being said though, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.